Yesterday we started this mimer. Again, we'll just see it for 3 days. We're not going to see the whole mimer. But to get a taste of who Rabbi Shimon is. So, one of the things that Rabbi Shimon said, quoted Shlomo Melech, Ani l'deidi v'alai chukase. His chukah is for me. Kabbalah Melech says that. The Rashbi says that about himself, but he says that about himself after on the day of his passing. Because he said that every day I connected myself to Kadosh Baruch Hu, and as a result of that, now, Valai Chukasa, the reward for that, so to speak. And the Rashbi also said that every day he looked into a particular pasuk. He would look at a pasuk, Vavaya Tisalo Nafshi, that my soul should be praised by Avaya. Now, that can be understood in two ways. Either the Eibishter is praising him, or that when people praise the Eibishter, they praise him, or when they praise him, they're praising the Eibishter. And that, the Rashbi explained, was a level of Bei Achido, that in him I'm one, I'm even beyond connection. And then what the Rebbe then spent, we haven't finished the second paragraph of the first dose. What the Rebbe spends the rest of the first dose explaining is that that's obviously a level, even though he reached that level on the last day of his life, which was Lag Beimer, but that was a level that he had some relevance to his whole life. And the Rebbe said, based on two things. One is that where a person's thought is, that's where he is. So this is what the Rashbi was thinking about all the time, of this level of Vaya Tisala Nafshi. And also, Yigaiti v'loy matzatzi al timing. If someone's trying to do something and if they say, I tried, but I didn't do it, so don't believe them. So in simple pshat, what are you not believing? That they didn't try. That they tried. They said they tried. Don't believe them. Right? But in this context, what are we not believing? V'loy matzatzi. Right? Must have had some shaykhs to this level. Now, you could say that Yigaiti v'loy matzatzi means that he got it at the end, the last day. Okay. The Rebbe says no. There must be some relevance to this level even through the rest of his life. And the way the Rebbe explained that was that it came into a state of revelation on the last day, in a state of shleimus on the last day, right? Because that's what he says. He looked into this pasuk his whole life, and he said, "Ayidna b'yom yistalkusay hagia ladarga na'ilishesay." What's the loshon of the Rashbi? V'ha'idna is kaim krakula, and now the pasuk has been fulfilled completely. In other words, there was a certain fulfillment. So that was the point the Rebbe wants to teach us in Ois Aleph. You got midway through the paragraph on page 126. Right? The Rebbe explains the amazing idea of Tarasa Nasa of the Rashbi. What does that mean? It doesn't mean he sits and learns Torah all day. Obviously that is what it means, but it means something much deeper than that. That his Torah was of a whole different quality than the Torah of anybody else. Mm-hmm. And it's in line, as we mentioned yesterday, it's in line with the famous statement of the Rashbi that he wasn't affected by Churban Abayis. In other words, he saw Elokus in a way that was unfiltered, so to speak. And yesterday we talked about it in terms of the difference between mad and man, Maim Duchrin, Maim Nukvin, masculine waters, feminine waters, that which comes from above below, that's masculine waters, that which comes from below above, feminine waters. It's called halas man, that's our avodah. Our avodah generally is halas man. Elevating the world to a state of godliness, meaning experiencing the world, being aware of the existence of the world in a very, very powerful way, but attempting to use that world and elevate that world, use that world for holiness and elevate that world, and connect it to its true source. Okay. But by the Rashbi, The Rashbi's experience of physical reality was different than everybody else's. He saw the elokus in it. He was aware of the physicality of it, but he saw the elokus in it, which is what we will experience. The Rebbe teaches us, be Mashiach. And we talked about it yesterday, but there was a line that the Rebbe said when he taught this. He was talking about the difference between Yemei Mashiach and now. As we said yesterday, we can repeat it because it's not a bad idea to repeat things. That now Metzius is B'Pshitus, the existence of created reality is obvious to us. And Elokus is B'Yischadshus. And Elokus is something that's a Chiddush, something novel. We have to remind ourselves of that. So we get up in the morning, we learn Chassidus. So we'll focus our conscious reality on the existence of godly reality as opposed to what strikes us powerfully, the existence of physicality, right? And in Yemei Mashiach, no, that Elokus will be B'Pshitus, it will be obvious that everything's Elokus. And Metzius B'Yischadshus, and the existence of physical reality will be a Chiddush. In other words, we'll have to remind ourselves of physical reality. We'll have to remind ourselves that if we put the cup down on the table, it'll stay there. You don't have to, think about it for a second. Yeah, that's the way it works. Mm-hmm. So Rebbe, when he told that, smiled and said, maybe B'Yemei Mashiach will learn physics before davening to know that we can put the siddur on the table and it'll stay there. The Eibishter, that'll be obvious. That won't be a problem. We won't have to learn siddurs before davening. We have to learn physics. I just met a guy, I see him all the time. A neighbor in Mayanot who's he's a teacher in Mechon Shlomo, and I schmooze all the time. So very often, I shouldn't say that. A few times a month, we're on the same bus in the morning. He goes to teach a class. I don't understand when I get on one of the same two buses every single day. I don't know what other bus he gets on. Every now and then he's on one of those buses. So he was explaining to me today that when he was 12 years old, he had a teacher in Cheder in Brooklyn who was Lubavitcher Chassid, so he went to spend Shabbos with him once when he was 12 years old. And he took him to the Rebbe Motzi Shabbos. I don't know exactly how that worked. Right? Maybe it was a bringing. I don't know. No, we didn't have time in the bus ride to figure that out. But the Rebbe talked to him in English and gave him a bracha. The Rebbe asked him, what does he want to be when he grows up? He's 12 years old. He said, a physicist. So he actually did get some sort of degree in college in something interesting along those lines. So the Rebbe said, you'll be able to see the wonders of the Creator all the time. You'll be studying the wonders of the Creator. And then the Rebbe gave him a bracha then the Rebbe said to him, you should have a lot of bracha and atzlocha in Gashmis and in Ruchnius. He's 12 years old. So there you go. In English. Rebbe talked to him. He asked me before, did the Rebbe speak English, which I don't understand if the Rebbe talked to him in English. V'yesh lo hisif. Right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines down. 5 lines down. V'yesh lo hisif. T'zeh shebekam drushim, that which in a number of drushim. Drushim means Chassidus and Zohar. So if you look, you can see Likutei Torah, Hemshech Yenasi Tafresh Mem, which is the Rebbe Marash, Hemshech Tafresh Samavav, which is the Rebbe Rashab, Hemshech Tafresh Ayin Beis, Taf Ayin Reish Beis, which is Ayin Beis, Rebbe Rashab. So a number of places. The Rebbe is now about to enter into a discussion, parts of which are extremely difficult, which we actually, some of the most difficult things are said in the footnotes. But still, there'll be certain things that we're sort of, we won't deal with at great length, we'll just sort of gloss over it. There's some extremely difficult ideas relative to, and we said this earlier, the difference between three things. Dveikus, the idea of atem dveikim by elokechem, you're clinging to him, longing for him. Hiskashrus, higher, connection. and his achdus, unity. So now the Rashbi said about himself, today I reached the level of be'achido. Okay. So, and the Rebbe said that before he was in a state of hiskashrus. Okay, but the pneumius of that hiskashrus was this unity. And so that's why it was relevant to him all day. That's what we learned yesterday. So now, what does the Rebbe say today? We can add to this. That which in a number of places in Chassidus, Muva inyan b'nishmasi be'achida, my neshama is one with you. That line in the Zohar. Behemshech echad, in continuation, meaning in the same sentence. Im bachad ketira is katana, with one kesher, right? Because we said the word kesher, ketira is a kesher, a bond, like a tie, a knot. With one knot, I'm bound up with you. Now, why is the Rebbe saying that? In Chassidus, those two are brought together often. Well, they're not brought together in the Zohar. In the Zohar, the Rashbi talks about the Indian of ketira, he's kashrus, and then 5 pages later, he talks about the Indian of be'achida. They're not brought together at all in the Zohar, whereas they are brought together in Chassidus. Chassidus, very often the Rebbe will mention be'achida, be'iskatarna. Okay, so that's what the Rebbe is mentioning here, and this is a continuation of the idea that when the Rashbi said, I reached this level on today, which is Lag B'Omer, he also reached this level on a pneumistic level before, because they're connected. Even though it's enough in the Zohar, they're separated, but the Rebbeim connect them. That somehow those two levels have something to do with each other. Why is it that the Rebbeim do that? That they mention them together even again? They're not mentioned together in the Zohar. Ki gam ba'imid b'chad ketiris katarna. Even in that level of with one knot, I am bound to you. Yesh b'pnimius, there is in a pnimiustic level. What's the pnimius of that level? What's the inner reality of that level? Be'achida. I'm one with you. The external expression is this hiskashrus, but the pnimius of is a oneness. Elo, shebameshech kol yemei chayav, and this is a continuation of what we saw yesterday. Bameshech kol yemei chayav, throughout the days of his life, lo yahayazeh, this reality of be'achida, begilui, wasn't revealed. It was bepnimius, it wasn't revealed. Ubeyemi stalkus, but on the day of his passing, beyemi stalkus shalei, on the day of his passing, sha'az mizgala pnimius, that then the deepest aspects of his reality were revealed. Hashodesh v'makar, the source, shall kol in yonei avedas adam, sha'avad b'meshech kol yimei chayav, on the day that a person passes away. So what's revealed is all of the pnimius of everything they accomplished in their life. So then, by the Rashbi, what was revealed? This higher level. Az mizgala pnimius, then it was revealed, the pnimius, the inner reality of the b'chad ketiri iskatarna, with one knot I was bound up with you. Shahu, that it is loy rak iskashrus, not only a connection, elcome be'achida, but also a unity. Okay. So that's what the Rebbe wants to say about the Rashbi. So, in essence, now, we haven't heard about the Vekas. Right? Wasn't mentioned. But we've learned about his kashrus and his achdus. The Rebbe is going to bring in a third level. Simply, it's the vekus, his kashrus, his achdus. 3 levels of connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, mentioned in Psukim, Vatem Hadvekim Barbash Elokechem, mentioned in the Zohar, the Katarna, and also the Rashbi mentions Be'achida. Okay. So, what are these levels? How are they expressed in our Veda? V'yuvin said, now it's very interesting, we mentioned this yesterday, Chassidim, the relationship of a Rebbe and Chassidim is a relationship of his kashrus. Right? That's what we talk about. His kashrus, the Rebbe, talk about all the time. Being makushim. Don't talk about his achdus. Think you should, it's the highest level, but we don't. Okay. V'yuven zeh bahakti ma'yadua. We'll understand this based on that which is well known. Now look at the footnote. You do it, right? That which is known. Look at the footnote 16. Where is it? Bir Zoyer la'admer Tzoi. The Mittler Rebbe wrote a sefer Bir Zoyer. He wrote a parish on the Zohar. That's well known. I mean, you've all looked that up, right? I mean, this you do it. A well-known idea of the Mittler Rebbe and his Bir Zoyer. Oh yeah, I read it on the bus yesterday. I was just looking for some light reading. Why the Rebbe has to say how you do it and make us feel bad, I don't know. But okay, I guess it's we're supposed to know. Now, what's really interesting, just stop in terms of the practicality of it all. The Mittler Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek both wrote Birei Zohar, which are really based on the Torahs of the Alter Rebbe, the Balatanya, their father and grandfather. So. And they're very, very similar. But they were out of print for decades. When the Rebbe said this Maimer, Tafshin Lamed Dalet, now this Maimer was said, it was said in Tafshin Lamed Dalet, that's right. But it was edited by the Rebbe in Tafshin Mem Tes. So it was edited in Tafshin Mem Tes, 1989. Meaning it was given to us, Lag Ba'emer, in 1989. This is the mimer that you would find on the Bima in Shul that had just been edited and printed and given out to the Chassidim to learn. When did the Rebbe say the mimer? He said the mimer in Tafshin Lamed Dalet, right? But in the years Mem Zayin, Mem Ches, until Nun Beis, so the Rebbe would edit Maimarim, and those edited Maimarim, they were very different than often the order of things that were said in the spoken Maimer were the order was different. There would be things added, there would be things subtracted. I mean, an edited piece is different than something the Rebbe would just say. The footnotes also are obviously a very important part of it because the Rebbe would add the footnotes. So the Maimer, Rav Yoel Khan, the Rebbe would ask Rav Yoel to work on a particular Maimer, and it would go back and forth. Rav Yoel would write it up, would go into the Rebbe would edit things, add things, take out things, write footnotes, send it back, and went back and forth until there was an edited mimer that's called Muga. Right? Muga means edited. So corrected, but it's edited. So this is an edited mimer. This came out in Tafshin and Aleph. By that time, well, probably not, Probably not by that time. For sure, in Tafshin Lamed Dalet, you couldn't find a copy of Birei Zohar, the Mittler Rebbe. It wasn't in print. I mean, you could find someone who had one, but you couldn't find one. It wasn't in print. Right? You couldn't buy one. Right? But, and it was decades before it was print. Now, Baruch Hashem, there's more stuff coming out with print, and it's not only coming out, it's coming out with Otiot Merubaot, like these kind of letters as opposed to Rashi script. This is much easier to read. It's coming out with notes. It's been worked on and edited, and there'll be footnotes explaining this is there's two different versions, and this seems to be the most reasonable one, etc. Okay, but it's funny. The Rebbe says you do about Birei Zohar. When the Rebbe said the Maimer, you could not buy one in the market. And as a matter, in the mills, you couldn't find a Birei Zohar in the store. Now you can. Those days. So it's just interesting that you do. Right? Same thing with Ayin Beis. Now and then the Rebbe will say something about it. They'll say that which is known, and you look at the footnote, it'll be Ayin Beis. Ayin Beis wasn't printed. It was printed once in Lamed Ches, and then printed again in Tafshin Nun Aleph. Nun Beis. And both times when they asked the Rebbe, should they print it, the Rebbe said, you can print it, but I'm not telling you to. Meaning, if you look in the front of most Sifrei Meimarim, it'll say, Lefi Haras Kfer Kedushas Admar Shlita, in accordance with the instructions of the Rebbe, we are printing this book. By Ayin Beis, it doesn't say that. Because the Rebbe didn't say you should print it. They asked a number of times, said if you want, you can print it. Rav Yoel was very afraid of Ayin Beis, because the first time they printed it was Tafshin Lamed Ches and the Rebbe got sick. The second time they printed it was Tafshin Nun Beis and the Rebbe got sick. Any connection? I have no idea. Rav Yoel talked about it a lot. That there's a connection. Rav Yoel is not the Rebbe. Rav Yoel Khan, who was the main reviewer of the Rebbe's Torah. He's the one that wrote this mimer the way we see it. It was written by Rav Yo. Rav Yo was the one who would write out the mimarim. Even the mimarim that you find that aren't edited. So the original versions of those are written by Rav Yo. There was someone else who came along later and wrote a different version. And the version you'll find if you just buy a book, say for mimarim Tafshin Tesvav, so you'll find Rav Yo's version in that book. Whereas if you look in Taras Menachem Tafshin Tesvav, you'll find someone else's version, and that's why there's a slight difference between them. Slight, but there's a difference.
Did Sifrim used to be published in Rashi's book?
Some books were printed in Rashi's book. Yeah, a lot of stuff. So then the Rebbe Marash's Maimarim, I used to sit across from a holy Jew. That Jew I tell you stories about that he worked in the previous Rebbe's apartment upstairs and helped the Rebbetzin, and all sorts of interesting stories of Shlomo Reiner, Tzolov Shalom, Shavalichtik, Gan Eden, such a special Jew. So Shlomo used to sit. We sat at the same table in shul for many years. He used to learn my Marmah, the Rebbe Marash, every morning Shabbos, every Shabbos morning. And he would learn them from the Ksav Yad. In those days, most of the Maimarim of the Rebbe Marash were not printed like this. They were just a facsimile of the Ksav Yad of the Rebbe Marash. Just his handwriting. So now, figured I couldn't understand any of it. I mean, he said, no, you get used to it. And he would read it as fast as he would read this, but he worked hard at it. It took him a while. But he learned, he could read the Ksav Yad of the... Okay. Those books have now been printed in these letters. But still, an old book, you find an old volume of the Rebbe Marash, take it off the shelf. If you're in a bookstore, you find a really old one there, or you're in someone's house, you find an old one. Take it off the shelf and open it up to see whether it's printed or it's a picture of the Ksav Yad. Ksav Yad, like just a page, a written page of the Rebbe Marash. The Rebbe Marash wrote out the Maimon. It's so hard to read. I mean, it's like anybody's handwriting, right? You have to get used to it. But Shlomo used to sit and learn. V'yedua zeh b'hakdim ha'yedua. Yuvan zeh b'hakdim ha'yedua. Shegam his kashrus, also his kashrus will amayla midevekas. It's beyond devekas. Now, why does it say gam his kashrus? Why does it say his kashrus? Oh, because we just learned that Beyachid is higher than his kashrus. But also, his kashrus is still higher than devekas, right? That's the also. Certainly Beyachida, where that's the highest level. We just learned that's higher than his kashrus. But also, his kashrus is higher than devekas. Now, what difference does all this make? Well, we'll see how these are expressed in our Veda. The devekas hi bechitzenius. Devekas is something external, k'may, like a pasuk. Kasher yidbak ha'ezer al masnei ish, like the belt is yidbak, connected to the masnei are like loins of the person, meaning your midriff, right? So the belt is connected. It's connected, but the belt isn't the person in any way, shape, or form. They're two completely different things, but they're close to each other, right? And that pasuk is describing the level of devekus by just using that verb specifically relative to a belt on someone's waist. Devekus the ezer, lamasneish, the closeness of the ezer, the belt, lamasneish, hirak lechitzaniusa is only external. Viskashrus, and hiskashrus is something hu bepnimius. Now the Rebbe is going to explain this much more because it's fascinating. Hu bepnimius, k'may, like. Well, let's find that word used in Tanakh and see the context of that word used in Tanakh. V'nafshay kshura b'nafshay. His soul is kashur, bound up with his soul. Who's it talking about? Famous pasuk. Well, not famous pasuk. It's a pasuk you've all heard. It's Binyamin and Yaakov. Binyamin and Yaakov. Kshura nafshay. You have a good job. Nafshay kshura b'nafshay. Right? Oh. So that's yes, they're obviously still two separate people, but there's a very powerful bond between those two people. And we wouldn't emphasize the separateness of them, we'd emphasize the sameness of them. It's not one, it's not the next level, which is Hisachdus, was a very, very powerful bond. And that's Iskashus. Shezeh Magia Mipnimiusa. This is coming from the inner reality of these two. Move on Mihemshech HaKosuv, as is understood from the continuation of that pasuk. Sham, gracious. Lamed Aleph. V'haya kiroise ki ein hanar umeis. What does it say? That if that child will pass away, if something will happen to Binyamin, Yaakov won't be able to deal with it. It'll be as if it happened to Yaakov. Right? Yaakov couldn't handle it. Right? Oh, okay. So that's his kashus. Pnimius. V'zeu achiluk ben karbonos l'kteris. Now I was going to explain this in real life, so to speak, meaning the vekus, his kashus, these are ideas about connection to the Eibush. Okay, but how do they express themselves in our Veda? Difference between karbonos and kteris. A sacrifice and the incense offering, which is the highest expression of Aveda in the Beis HaMikdash. Yisad and Basi Lagani. Kataris is, interesting enough, from what language? Kataris, what does that mean? Don't say incense. What? Kesher. Katar. Kesher. Same word. Right? Is Katar. Now, this is a word in Lashon HaKodesh, but it's interesting. The root of the word is Katar, which is Kesher. Right? So it's beyond korban. So what's the root of the word korban? Karov. Close. But not tied together. Not bound up. But they're close. Right? Oh, onion. Right? Dafka, the sense that Keteris is all about is the sense of Reach, which is a unique sense. We've talked about this before. Right? What's unique about the sense of Reach? Smell? Okay, it's true. It's very interesting. It's very ruchani to the extent that what you're smelling you can't see. Even though sometimes there'll be smoke or something, but I mean you can't see the smell, right? Though you don't see the sound you hear. Though you might see the source of it, but also even the smell you can see the source of it. Sometimes yes, sometimes not. Okay, but you're right. It's a very ruchani thing. It's one of the things Mashiach does, right? Yerichai, which is the Manul Eretz Yisrael, which is the lock. Once you get past Jericho, you're in a state of holiness, Eretz Yisrael. So by Mashiach it says Moreach V'doin. Mashiach will smell and judge. Okay. So something else is very unique about the sense of smell. Very, very interesting. Okay, so this we've talked about this before. I'm sure love dafka with the people in this room. I sit in this chair I just sit in this chair. So it's love dafka. I said this to you, but probably some of you heard it once. But that's okay. You're going to hear it again this time. You're going to remember it if you heard it once before, and if you didn't hear it once before, so now you'll learn it. Chet Eitzadas. She saw it. She touched it. She heard about it, and she ate it. Didn't smell it. The one sense that wasn't polluted by the Chet Eitzadas was Reach, the sense of smell. And for that reason, the sense of smell is very powerfully connected to the essential existence of a person, and that's why when a person passes out, if a light in their shining a light in their eyes doesn't work, which if they passed out that long, even calling their name might not work. But what very well might work, and what do people use? Smelling salts. It's really interesting, right? Dafka smelling salts jolts the person up. Wake up! You love Dafka. Right? Smelling salts. You get into a place that's a deeper place than even sound. Even their name. Even though sometimes calling their name will arouse them. Right? Famous story of the Rebbe. Just last night we finished this whole section in the videos on letters of the Rebbe, about 15 different videos on the Rebbe's relationship with Kiruv and Hashpah and others, and etc., why it's so important, etc. Also how to do it. So one of the themes that runs through everything is B'darchei Noyam. It should be done pleasantly and calmly. Should accentuate the positive and not the negative. Talk to the person about going to a new place of goodness as opposed to leaving behind the place of darkness. Don't talk about the darkness, just talk about the light. They're fascinating letters, really amazing. So there's a story of Rabbi Feller from Minnesota. It's an amazing shaliach, very special chassid. So he had written something for a magazine, and he had mentioned in what he wrote that as a mashal, that in order to wake someone up who's sleeping, who's passed out or sleeping, fainted. So he used the word litzok. You say very loudly their name in their ear. So he sent it in the Rebbe to check it out. So I don't know other things the Rebbe edited. But the one thing the Rebbe, he said, you shout, as he said. You shout in their ear their name. The Rebbe crossed out shout and said whisper. How are you makarv another Jew? Friedrich Rebbe says, first mit the finger, noch mit the hand, and then with the hand, very gently. Right? And then you go home and say Tehillim with tears about their negative spiritual state. The other person's not yours. Amazing letters that I've been writing about it. Really fascinating letters. So, Karbonis and Keteris. The Avedis of Karbonis, he mitzad zeh. Avedis of Karbonis is a result of the fact she Yisrael devukim babai, that we're clinging to him, close to him. Kediz v'medrash b'Zohar. This is something that's explained in Midrashim, explained in the Zohar. The idea of the expression of devekus, the tem hadvekim bavai location, right? And that's karbanos. We're close to him, like a belt to you, but not one. Therefore, they would sacrifice the karbanos on mizbeach hachitzon, on the external altar. The altar outside, meaning there were two altars in the base of Mikdash, more internal and more external, physically, closer to Kodesh HaKodashim, farther than Kodesh HaKodashim. The benefesh Adam, the Rebbe is going to explain what this is, so we don't have to explain it now, so don't worry, the rest of the paragraph is going to explain it. The benefesh Adam, the external expression of the heart. Again, the Rebbe will explain exactly what that is, so don't worry. Uketeris, hu loshen kesher. Keteris comes from the loshen kesher. It's this line that's really interesting based on what we saw yesterday, where the Rebbe quotes the Friedrich Rebbe, and the Friedrich Rebbe brings a pasuk to show that the targum of kesher is katar. But everybody knows that. Now the Rebbe just says it now. He brings the pasuk, writes a whole long footnote about why his father-in-law did what his father-in-law did. Okay, but here it's just said simply. Uketarusu lashon kesher. The kol kesher shebapasuk, any Indian of kesher shebapasuk, muturgam is translated, page 127, katar. But we know that. And in all fairness, the Rebbe said it the page before, but the Rebbe said it in the page before in the words of the Friedrich Rebbe, and the Friedrich Rebbe brings a pasuk, and there's a footnote explaining all of that. Okay, so carbon is the vekus, and keteris is his kashrus. Kesher, that's what keteris means. V'lochein a keteris he wear al mizbeach hapnimi, the inner mizbeach. Why? The benefesh adam upnimi yisalev. Because by us, that's Panemius Alev. Now, what's the difference between Chitzonius Alev and Panemius Alev? And we have to understand that. So if the Rebbe didn't talk about that, so then we'd have to talk about it. But Baruch Hashem, the Rebbe talks about it, so we don't have to say anything. We can read Baruch Hashem. So now the Rebbe says, V'achiluk shebein Aveda the Chitzonius Alev l'Aveda the Panemius Alev, who the difference between Aveda that comes from the it's still Aveda of the heart. It's still a korban. It's a real Aveda. This is not, it's not someone playing baseball as opposed to doing mitzvahs. That this is Chitzonius and this is Panemius. I'm glad the doc isn't here and I said that. I just slipped out. We're not talking about Chitzonius Mamish and Panemius. We're talking about two different levels of Avodas Hashem that are both extremely powerful. And yet one is still Chitzonius Alev and one is Panemius Alev. And what's the difference between those two levels in Avodah? The Avodah the Chitzonius Alev, the Rebbe's going to say two things about it. Hi al pitam v'das. It's based on reason. It's based on intellect. The ba'ava shal pitam v'das shaykh shinuyim. And love that's based on intellect, what can happen? Change. It might change. Because my understanding of things might change. I might be presented with something that challenges the preconceived notion that I had, which is true, not that the preconceived notion was false. We're talking about Avodah. We're talking about Ava. Ava, Pitam V'das, is something that's subject to change. So those are the two aspects of Avodah the Chitzonius Alev. Aleph, it's al Pitam V'das. Therefore, what's the chitzonius of it? Tam V'das is based on my understanding of something, so to speak, outside of myself. It's based on and we saw this in different forms, in different maimarim. Right? It's like Mazli Chazi. Mazli Chazi, what's Mazli Chazi? That the person's emunah is based on an event. What's the event? The neshama, in Elam Atzilus, sees Elokus. So because the neshama sees Elokus, so they believe in Elokus. Okay. Now that's obviously an incredibly powerful belief because it's coming, seeing is believing. So that's true. Okay. That being said, it's not immutable. It can change. That's why where did we learn all this? Oh, come on. From the mimer. Thank you very much. It was a mimer. The mimer we just did. Great. You're gonna meet a Jew on the street and you're gonna want to explain an idea to him. You're gonna say, "Oh, it's the mimer we just did. It's a mimer. The mimer." Oh, thank you very much. Vata tetzava. Fair. You learned it, you had a test in it, you did great on the test, you mamish and those 5 people who actually took the time to answer the questions on the test did extremely well. Don't ever forget that Vata Tetzava. Don't forget, that's, in life you see my Marim. As Hashem, you can see lots of my Marim. There might be, a Mimer, you sat Shabbos morning, you learned the Mimer, okay, you remember it, you don't remember it, you should, obviously you should. I'm not telling you to forget it. But it's possible there's all sorts of things I don't remember. Vata Tetzava can't be something that I don't remember. Right? The mimer. What do you mean? Okay, maybe it is the mimer, but if it's the mimer, then I remember its name, right? What's the name of the wife? I remember her name. A wife? I don't know. Maybe not. I don't know. One of my wives. I'm not sure. I don't remember which one it was. But the wife? So I remember the wife. Right? Vata Tetzava. In Vata Tetzava, the Rebbe explained to us very, very clearly 2 different levels of the source of the emunah. There was a third, which was Tam V'das, right? But the 2 most powerful levels were Etzem and Nefesh and Mazli Chazi. And Mazli Chazi was the Nefesh in Elam Atzilus seeing God. While you and I are sitting down here in Elam Hazeh, wondering about what's for breakfast, which I don't think any of us are because we know. But right? So, and even if we didn't know it, I hope we wouldn't wonder, right? But we're down here in Elam and dealing with physicality. So there's an aspect of our neshama sitting in Elam Atzilus right now that is seeing Elokus. That's called Chaya Shebenefesh. Okay, which again we mentioned so many times, and it's just so fascinating. The Rebbe at no point in the Mimer mentions Chaya Shebenefesh, those words, but that's the level the Rebbe is talking about constantly. Right? Okay, the Rebbe also doesn't mention Yechidah. So that level of neshama Chaya Shebenefesh sees Elokus, and the Rebbe says that the advantage of that is it's very, very powerful. The disadvantage is that it's an event that happens to me, so it doesn't necessarily make an immutable reality, it cause an immutable reality in me. What does? An essential connection. Essential connection, so that's just who I am, that's what I am. It's nothing, it's immutable, can't be changed. It's not shayach l'shinui, right? What's the example of that in Gashmias? It's not shayach to shinui. DNA. That's your essential, that's your essence in Gashmias. Now, today they can fiddle around with it. Right? No, that's good. I mean, look, it could be bad because the wrong people will be able to do it, but it could be, in medicine, it's going to revolutionize medicine because someone with a genetic disorder, once they can figure out how to fix it on the genetic level, that will be an unbelievable thing. And they're really close. The thing they're working on hardest, as far as I understand, is breast cancer. Because it's basically genetic. There's two genes, a non-Jewish gene and a Jewish gene. There's a Jewish gene that only Jewish women have. 1 in 8 women has a gene that makes them susceptible to breast cancer. BRCA. That's heavy. 1 in 8. My goodness. Right? And if you have that gene, you have to be so careful. I mean, really careful. Not checkups all the time. It's crazy. So now they're working. They're evidently they're getting somewhere else. They want to get to a place where they can figure out how to change the genetic reality of that woman so that problem no longer exists. That's 15% of the women, 14% of the women in the world. Right? It's 1.5 wives in this room. No, that right? I mean, that's serious stuff. And if you have it, good chance the kids are going to have it. The girls. The boys don't matter. The boys only matter to know that they have it so that their daughters can get checked. Right? Their daughters should get checked. Right? It's not going to affect them. It can result in there's a few I think men with the gene, they tell them they should probably do a colonoscopy more often, I think. But it's not as clear as the problem with women. Okay. So DNA, what's DNA? So even DNA, Bezrat Hashem, they'll figure out how to change that again, only for the good. There'll be people who use it for bad, obviously, but for the good, and that's the cutting edge of what's happening in medicine these days. So if they could do that, amazing. So we'll no longer be a mushal for Hetzim and Neshama. But it still is today, right? If your DNA is you have black hair, so you can dye it blonde for 60 years, it doesn't matter, it's still black. The DNA is still black. A Jew who's disconnected from the Eibishter regarding every revealed activity that they do is still essentially connected to the Eibishter as much as Moshe Rabbeinu in his DNA, in Hetzim and Neshama. Okay, whereas there might be a connection that's based on some event, external event. That's Tam Vadas, that's intellect. I understand why I should love God, and my love comes from that understanding. That's amazing, that's incredible, that's wonderful. But it's still something that might be shayach to change because it might be that someone could convince me otherwise. Chas v'sholom. Right? So that's called chitzonius halev. V'avodah the pnimius halev. This is what Chassidus talks about all the time, even though Chassidus is all about teaching you rationally about godliness, right? It's all about using your seichel to connect to God. But Chabad is not about intellect. Chabad is about emunah. But wait a minute, Chabad means Chachma Bina Das. It means intellect. So shouldn't the focus be on intellect? Absolutely not. The focus should be on using your intellect to bring your emunah into your conscious reality. And your emunah is a power beyond intellect. Emunah goes where intellect can't. You can believe about levels of godliness that you can't understand. Right? And not you only believe it, you don't know it. No. Because intellect is because emunah, faith, emunah is a more powerful power of the soul, so it can help me connect to things that my intellect can't connect to. Those levels of godliness about which the Zohar says, "Leis machshava tfisa beichlal," no thought can comprehend them. My emunah can touch that place. My intellect can't, but emunah can. And there are people who are, it's just so unreasonable. It's such bad intellect to think that there's nothing beyond intellect. But okay, there are people who really are so stuck in intellect that they think that if they can't understand it, it doesn't exist. Explain your love for your parent. Oh yeah, I sat down and I made a list of all the things I like about my father and all the things I don't like about my father, and in the end it came out that I should love him. He's really a good guy. That's definitely why I have a relationship with him, because of my intellectual understanding of the fact that he's worthy of my time. It's not where it comes from. It comes from a place much deeper than that. Okay, that's where it goes. So to the Eibishter. That's called panemius. Right, Mark Twain. Mark Twain had some of the. He was the master of the great one-liner, and one of his great one-liners was, when I was 15, I thought my father was a real jerk. When I was 20, I was amazed at what the old man had learned in 5 years. Right. Now, what does that mean? His connection to his father was based on essential connection, but it's also true it has to resonate in your conscious reality, and you have to begin to appreciate it, which you begin at an older age, not at 15. Most 15-year-olds don't, and they are going through some necessary process of separation in order to create an independent identity, which they have to have. Okay. So they won't live in their parents' basement when they're 35. Okay. But that being said, the essential connection is still there. And the essential connection is not based on the fact that later on in life I come to an appreciation of it. I just come to an appreciation of it in my seichel. Okay, well that's why we use seichel relative to the Eibishter. Why are you learning Chassidus? To arouse your emunah to resonate in your conscious reality. That's panemius alev. Lamayla mitam v'das. And what's unique about that? She'ein shayach b'shinui. That there is no change. So two differences between chitzonius alev and panemius alev. Chitzonius alev is al pitam v'das. Now they go together, these two differences, and therefore there's shinui. Panemius alev is lamayla mitam v'das, and therefore there's no shinui. And that's the ultimate in emes. A true connection is a connection without a shinui. Right? It's an amazing example. It's brought in Chassidus all the time. Sometimes, and you've run into this fairly recently, sometimes you need what's called mayim chayim in order to bring about tahara. Right? What's mayim chayim? So mayim chayim will be water that comes from a natural source. It's called mayim chayim. Okay, so the Chazal talk about, what is that? What must that natural source be? Right? The water that serves as a mikveh. So there's amazing halacha. The water from what's called naros mechazvin, annoying rivers, disappointing rivers. What's a disappointing river? A river that runs dry every now and then. You can't count on it. So, la halacha, a river that runs dry once every 7 years cannot be the source of mayim chayim, because it's not true. It's false. What do you mean it's false? There's water there 354 days a year for 6 years for 2 months in the summer, it ran dry once in 7 years. Not Mayim Chaim. It's not real. Why? Subject to change. So manyen. La halacha, that Mayim is not called Mayim Chaim. It can't be the source of a mikveh. It's not Mayim that's mitaher. If once every 7 years it goes dry, which around here there's all sorts of water sources that, every wadi, they call them a wadi. What's a wadi? Basically a dry riverbed. There used to be a river there. In the winter there might be a river there. Okay. The Jordan doesn't. Jordan's Mayim Chaim, doesn't go dry. Right? Okay. So anything that's shaykh to shinui is not real. So chitzonius alev, that's why it's chitzonius. It's something external. It's not me yet. That doesn't mean that it's not something impressive. That river that's flowing is very impressive, but if it goes dry, What's really interesting about that, if you think about it, b'pnimius, that means that when it's not dry, that's based on some sort of external circumstance, because the possibility of it being dry exists. So therefore, there's an external explanation as to why it's not dry. But it only goes dry once every 7 years, Beseder. The fact that there's water in this thing is not an essential reality, it's based on some external reality. Now that external reality happens all the time, most of the time. I mean, only once every 7 years it's not there, but it's still not the emes of what the thing is. Must be something happens that explains why there's water here. Now, you could also, you might look at it the other way and say, no. The water is essential, but there's something unusual that explains why there's no water here once every 7 years. No. Interesting, that's not how we look at it. If there's once every 7 years not water in that river, then it's not Mayim Chaim, it's not alive. Amazing halacha, right? Which is, a simple expression of where halacha becomes a lesson in panemius. So we'll say that it's some sort of external reason why there is water. Also, there's an external reason why there isn't. That's also true. But there's also an external reason why there is, because it's possible that there won't be. What do you mean possible? Once every 7 years. That's called possible. So that's not emes. And even if there is a certain aspect of emes to it, it's certainly not emes lamita, absolute truth. Right? That's important in Avodah, just to throw that out because it's something that bothers people, right? And Chassidus talks about this a lot, and the Rebbe talks about it a lot. That you might think that something that you do isn't true because you might not always be there, right? Meaning you're davening. It might even be you paid attention to a couple of words in your davening, right? But then, right, that story, we probably talked about it, about the person who said that that generally in his davening he has machshava zaros, strange thoughts. If he has 2 machshava zaros, okay. If he has 3 machshava zaros, so that's a better davening. If he has 4 machshava zaros, that's an even better davening. If he has 5, that's really good davening. What do you mean? The opposite. So no. If I have 1 machshava zara, that means from the start of Shemana Esrei till the end, I had 1 machshava zara. The same strange thought the whole way through. I didn't think of God once throughout the whole process. If I have 2 machshava zaras, that means in between those strange thoughts, I actually must have thought about God for a minute. Oh, that's pretty good. If I have 3 machshava zaras, Baruch Hashem, twice in Shemana Esrei I actually thought about God. 4 machshava zaras, phew! I'm on fire. 3 times in Shemana Esrei I actually thought about God, not about how much kavanah I'm having. Oh, I'm doing such a good job of davening. Oh yeah. I guess not. When you have a conversation with a person, you're thinking to yourself, gee, I'm enunciating the words well today. Boy, oh boy. Oh, I'm so happy. Oh, that was such a good thing to say, what I just said. That's what you're thinking when you're having a conversation with the person? Then you're not having a conversation with the person. You're having a conversation with yourself. The person's just standing there. When you have a conversation with the person, what are you doing? You're actually conversing with the person, and you're aware of what you're saying, and you understand that it will have a certain effect on the person, and you're waiting for their response, and you're really engaged. Okay. Oh, I had such kavanah and davening today. I guess not. Because if that's what I'm thinking about, then I don't have it. I'm thinking about myself. Oh, I'm doing such a good job. Right? You know, sitting in this chair well. Really, you know, have my yashvan well placed in the chair, and my feet are just in the right position to be in a state of comfort. Oh, I'm doing this so well. What are you, nuts? Okay. So davening might be a difficult thing to do. I don't know, how did we get there? I don't know. Oh, I know why we got there. Because you might think, therefore, none of it's emes. Because if you know, I even those words that I actually thought about in davening, I might have got halfway through Heidu Levaya Kira Bishmei. I might have got through those 4 words and actually related to the fact that I'm praising God, and then I just started thinking about whatever. Where the Shliach Tzibur is, where I am, where, you know, am I going to finish on time? And whatever, who knows, whatever gets in there, you know, or something else. You want to take a trip around the world, Davin Shmona Esrei. So, do you think that Haidu Levai Kira Bishmei, those 4 words weren't real? No, they were real. Were they emes lamita, absolute truth? No, because absolute truth doesn't change. But was there an emes to them? Yes. I'm saying that just because of what we're learning here to make sure that it doesn't depress you. Because there's a level of emes that might not be eternal, but there is an emes to it. Meaning, if you go in the water in that river that isn't really Mayim Chaim, you get wet. It's not that there's not water there. There's an emes to the water. It's just not emes lamite because it's shayach to change. But there's an emes to the water. Because you're going to get wet. Okay. So when you do something positive in a Veda, that's real. Even if it might be that in 5 minutes, 2 minutes later, immediately afterwards, you're thinking some extraneous thought that has nothing to do with the Eibishter, or might actually be contrary to his will. That doesn't mean that what you did wasn't true. That mitzvah was a mitzvah. Doesn't diminish the mitzvah. The mitzvah is a mitzvah. It wasn't worth anything because look what happened to me right after. That's not true at all. If that were the case, the last thing you would ever spend your time doing is putting tefillin on people in the street. What a waste of time. And there's people who say this because they don't understand this. What a waste of time. The guy puts on tefillin, but then he goes into a treif restaurant. Like, what have you done? That tefillin is infinite, beyond infinite. It has an incredible effect on this person. It might not be seen at this point, but that mitzvah is infinite. At that moment, that person was truly, powerfully connected to the Eibishter. What happens next, that's a separate issue. Don't take the mitzvah away from the guy just because he walked into a treif restaurant on the streets of Manhattan right after you wrapped him up in tefillin. It's a little harder to walk into a treif restaurant around here, right? It's a hechsher you don't eat, so it's treif. Beis Yosef. Okay. The tefillin's real, so that's important to know. But is it emes lamita? No. Still chitzonius. Still chitzonius. And that's the change the Rebbe is talking about. Let's finish the paragraph. Panemius, it's lamayla mitam vadas. It's coming from a deeper place, and therefore, shein shayach bo shinui. There's no shinui. V'zeu shekarbonos hu loshen kiruv. That's why karbonos are a language of closeness. 2 separate things, but they're very close. Uktaris loshen iskashus. And Uktaris is a language of a bond. They're almost one. They're not mamish one, but they're almost one. The kiruv mara shu metzias. Kiruv teaches that those 2 things, but we're talking about us to the Eibishter, that the person who is close is a metzias. He's an existence unto himself. Ela shu karav lalakus. He's close to the Eibishter. It's also possible that he could distance himself if we're calling him Karev, so he could also be Rachok. These kashrus, Keteres, who kesher shel kaima. Right? That's halachic concept in Hilchos Shabbos, right? A kesher shel kaima, the type of kesher you're not allowed to tie. A double knot. Double knot you can't tie because it's a kesher shel kaima. What does that mean? It won't come undone. Now, it theoretically can come undone, obviously, but simply we assume it won't. Right? Okay, so now we don't, obviously you have to be careful about tying knots on Shabbos, there's no question, right? When is that going to become an issue with you? Well, it might be that 6 days a week when you tie your little kid's shoe, right? Which is usually done in a very enjoyable way, that they climb up on your lap and you tie their shoe for them and then they go back down and away they go into the wild blue yonder to live their life. Okay, so how do you tie a little kid's shoe? You double tie the bow. You tie a bow, but then you tie a knot in the bow. Because if you just tie a bow, he's going to be back in 5 minutes because the shoe's going to come undone because he's a little kid. Yours don't, but his will. You don't believe me? Fine. Come back and tell me in 10 years that I was right. Okay. So what do? 6 days a week, you double tie. On top of the bow, you tie a knot with the 2 little bows. That won't come undone. Remember not to do that on Shabbos when you're tying your shoe, because that's a kesher shel kaima, and that's also on Shabbos. So you don't do that on Shabbos. So beseder, you spend more time with your kid because he keeps coming back to tie his shoes. Okay. So that's a kesher shel kaima. The miti sinyan kesher shel kaima, who the true expression of kesher shel kaima. There is a kesher shel kaima, because there's a shinui in a kesher shel kaima. You can undo a knot. Right? But the Rebbe is just talking about what's the true, the most powerful expression of kesher shel kaima is Hushein Shaykh Bashinui. It will never come undone. Now, there's no knot like that in Gashmias. Right? But there are knots that are so powerful that we will, base our life on it. Sailors, when they tie certain knots of the sails, etc., so they're basing their life on the fact that this knot will stay there right now. Because if it comes undone, it could be dangerous. Right? Okay, so they're going to tie a knot that we assume is going to stay. Now, will it stay for the next 4,000 years? No, of course not. But it's still what you and I will call a kesher shel kaima. Okay, so but in Gashmias, it's going to come undone. There will be no rope there in 4,000 years. It'll just disintegrate. Okay, but in Ruchnias, it's possible. So that's Iskashrus. Iskashrus is a connection that's unchangeable. Korbanos is a closeness, but that closeness could turn into distance. It's possible. Hopefully not, but it's possible. Okay, stop there. We'll go weiter on Sunday. Have a wonderful Shabbos.
Thank you.